We're going to unpack an absolutely incredible story of survival, a flight that really, truly defied all the odds. All right, just imagine this for a second. You're on an overnight flight, way up high, cruising over the ocean. Dinner's over, the lights are dim, you're maybe just starting to doze off. And then, suddenly, that constant, familiar hum of the engines, it just stops. Gone. You're plunged into total darkness and this really eerie, unnerving silence. And no, this wasn't some bad dream. This was the absolutely impossible reality for every single person on Air Transit Flight 236 back on August 24th, 2001. They had no fuel. They were tens of thousands of feet up in the air, and the only place they were going was down. So you gotta be asking, right? How does a modern jet just run out of gas in the middle of a flight? Well, to figure that out, we actually have to rewind about 9 days before the flight, because that's when a tiny, tiny error, we're talking millimeters here, set this whole catastrophe in motion. Okay, so here's what happened. The plane's right engine had to be replaced. The thing is, Air Transat didn't have a spare one just lying around, so they got a loaner from Rolls-Royce. Now, here's the catch. The replacement engine was a slightly older model, and that meant its parts weren't an exact match for the ones on the plane. You know, the core mechanical issue here was surprisingly simple. It's kind of like using the wrong charger for your phone, right? It might seem like it fits, but you know it's a disaster waiting to happen. The mechanics ended up pairing a brand new fuel tube with an older hydraulic tube. And these two parts, well, they were never ever designed to work together. But look, a single mistake like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum. There's always a story. The mechanics were totally pressed for time, and the online manual they needed, the network was down. Now get this, a backup manual was right there in the same building on a CD, but the lead tech had no idea it even existed. So to get the plane back in the air, a shortcut was taken, a really fateful one. Because of that mismatch, these two metal tubes were now sitting just millimeters apart from each other. So with every single flight that followed, the constant vibration of the engine, you can guess what happens next. The hydraulic tube started rubbing and rubbing, slowly wearing a hole right through the fuel line. It was literally a ticking time bomb hidden deep inside the wing. Okay, so now let's fast forward to the night of the flight itself. Let's see exactly how this hidden little flaw snowballed into a massive life or death emergency right over the middle of the Atlantic. So, a few hours into the flight, a warning pops up in the cockpit. It says there's a fuel imbalance, way less fuel in the right wing tank than the left. But you have to remember, this is a modern Airbus A330. The pilot's first thought isn't, oh no, a leak. It's, probably a computer glitch. I mean, a massive fuel leak on a plane like this, it just seemed impossible. And this right here, this is the crucial part. The instruction is written right there, plain as day in their checklist. But instead of grabbing the manual, the crew decided to act from memory to try and fix the imbalance. And by doing that, they completely missed this one vital warning. And this is where things go from bad to catastrophic. In their attempt to fix what they thought was just a minor imbalance, they opened something called a cross-feed valve. What did that do? Well, it sent all the perfectly good fuel from the left tank straight over to the right side and right out through the leaking engine. They were, without knowing it, literally dumping the rest of their fuel into the Atlantic Ocean. As you can imagine, that decision just massively sped up the fuel loss, and it led to the one moment everyone on board was about to dread, even though they had no idea it was coming. So at 6:13 in the morning, the right engine flames out, just gone. Then, only 13 minutes later, think about how short that is, the left engine sputters and dies. The plane is now a glider. For 19 absolutely terrifying minutes, those 306 people were just passengers in a giant, powerless jet falling in total silence over the pitch-black Atlantic. 144 kilometers. Just try to wrap your head around that distance. That's how far Captain Robert Pichet and his co-pilot Dirk de Jager managed to glide that powerless 200-ton machine. And to this day, it is still the longest powerless glide of a commercial airliner in history. I mean, that is just an unbelievable, mind-boggling feat of flying. Meanwhile, back in the cabin, it was just pure terror. That engine hum that you get so used to, it was replaced by a silence so complete, it was deafening. The flight attendants are going through the motions, showing people brace positions, telling them to find their life jackets. People were praying, holding on to loved ones. Everyone was getting ready to crash into the freezing ocean. Up front, Captain Pichet was drawing on all his old experience as a bush pilot. He knew this was it. One shot, no second chances, no go-rounds. He had to bring the plane in super fast, way faster than a normal landing speed. The touchdown was incredibly violent. 8 of the plane's 10 tires just exploded on impact. But somehow, against all odds, the plane stayed on the runway and screeched to a stop. And when the dust finally settled, the result was nothing short of a miracle. Every single one of the 306 people on that flight was evacuated, safely. 0 deaths. The only injuries were a few minor ones, and most of those actually happened during the chaotic, but obviously life-saving evacuation. But look, the story doesn't just end there with that incredible landing. The aftermath, well, it brought heroes to light, but also some really, really tough lessons. So Captain Pichet was, of course, hailed as a hero all over the world. But then, a twist. The media dug up his past and discovered that about 20 years earlier, he had actually served time in a U.S. jail for drug smuggling. All of a sudden, the story got a lot more complicated, right? It started this huge debate about heroes and second chances. And I think, ultimately, this is the real lesson from Flight 236. It was never just one single mistake. It was a chain of failures. You had the maintenance error, the manual that no one read, the pilots relying on memory instead of the checklists, even the plane itself not having a proper warning system. The thing is, if just one of those links in the chain had held, this whole thing could have been avoided. You know, the story of Flight 236 is just such a powerful reminder. It shows you how a bunch of small, what seem like minor errors can cascade into a full-blown catastrophe. But it also shows you how incredible skill, a bit of luck, and the systems that do work can pull us back from the very brink. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? About all the little, unseen checks and balances that have to work perfectly every single day, just to keep our complex world running safely.